Hi, Preston. This is Jackie. Sorry, I just got your email, so it looks like you sent it late Wednesday night, right before we went away for Thanksgiving break. So I hope this gets to you soon enough to be helpful. I'm at the library homepage, so just a quick reminder, you go to the college homepage, click on library, and that gets you here. And we'll go to our library databases. Your question was, what was the second site I showed you? To be honest, I can't remember either what the second one was, so I'll show you a couple that I think might be helpful for you. So where we're going to go is to our top library databases. I think you know that. You sound like you're kind of there, but we looked at opposing viewpoints together. I'm certain that's the first one we looked at. We may have looked at CQ Researcher together. This is only available on campus, so you will have to come on campus to use it. I'll walk you through it really quick, and then I'll show you one more database, which we may have covered. In fact, I think we did. So with CQ Researcher, there's a couple different ways you can use it. You can search by keyword. This is where you'll want to be really flexible with your terminology. We've looked at, terrorism, of course, is the big phrase, but we're looking at kind of comparative issues of how do we look at the issue of terrorism, and how do we look at it from this kind of challenging state we're at right now, where there's both domestic and international terrorism, and how do we look at and define these things. So you might want to think of other words for terrorism, and I know you had said freedom fighters quite a bit too. So I think one of the things for your paper or your presentation, I can't remember what it's for, is really giving a solid definition for your audience, how you're defining these two issues. So that's the number one thing that I would recommend that you do, is find a good strong definition of your two topics, domestic, maybe international, how they're similar, how they're alike, and then that will help kind of, give that background for your audience. So here at terrorism, these are showing up kind of in relevance. I'm going to go with newest. I like to do that, which does kind of change things a little bit. So sometimes that's not helpful. In fact, maybe I will go ahead and change that back to different topic, back to relevance. That's interesting. So you have to play with the databases to make them work for you. Even I do, and I use them all the time. So there's a couple short reports which could probably be pretty good. This is where I get a little bit nervous because these are older. And right, terrorism and the internet, completely forgot about that. That's a whole other kind of form of terrorism, right? Should websites that promote terrorism be shut down? That's a really interesting thing, because actually that could cover both domestic and international. I'm just going to pretend for a minute that this is what you're interested in. And again, just to show you really quick, this is how you would view the PDF. You'd click here to get the citation, and you have email print options. This gives you the full report, but if you wanted to, you could go immediately down to like the pro and con of this issue to compare that. And these two scholars are answering the question, is cyber terrorism a significant global threat? So if you wanted to speak to that, you could do that. This is also a great website for the maps and graphs, are really fantastic, I would say. And the other thing that I'd like to point out is that there are some other things. The other related reports can be really fascinating in this regard. So if you wanted to look at prosecution, that's kind of interesting, of how to deal with this, you could certainly do that. If you wanted to look at less domestic terrorism but more of this international terrorism, you could certainly look at that as well. So that's CQ Researcher in a nutshell. This, if we go back and type in things like, I'm curious if we type in domestic terrorism. Sorry, I can't type well. If something else would come up, or if we have to think of other language for that, domestic violence comes up, so that's interesting. But under these short reports, it looks like that speaks to some of those things as well. So that's kind of fascinating. So something to keep in mind. So that may have been the second site I showed you. The second site may have also been back to library databases, top library databases, academic OneFile. This may have been where we spent some time. Compared to CQ Researcher and opposing viewpoints, academic OneFile really helps you kind of work with your topic a little bit more. The other ones are a little bit more, here's a report, here's a story, just on terrorism. This database is usually more efficient in some ways, but it also demands more of you as a researcher. So this is where, instead of just these packaged reports, it's you as a researcher thinking about how do I want to ask this question or frame this question? What are the terms really being used? What do I want to zero in on as far as my topic? So the last database, freedom fighters, may not have come up because that's not always the most common term, but this is going to bring, newspaper articles, magazine articles, scholarly journal articles, news reports, media, a whole bunch of cool stuff. And because of that, there's different ways that this topic has been talked about. So really, if you did want to look at the concept of freedom fighters, and oh, this is interesting. I mean, Ulster. Remember, I mentioned Ireland in our conversation. Ulster is in Northern Ireland, and that's one of the interesting issues of terrorism. Freedom fighters and, I don't know, terrorism. Again, if that's too much, you can limit it. So, or take that out. That's kind of helpful. You can always just play with this and come up with a different terminology. So what comes up first is academic journals. These are our scholarly journals. They're going to be the most, I guess, written by and for usually researchers, college students doing research, somebody who wants that really kind of high-end analysis of a topic and exploration of a topic. And freedom fighters and zealots, that's really kind of interesting. Almost, I think, in some ways, I feel like what we were talking about. If you find this as an article that you want, you would just click here. And you can see some key things. This was written in 2009, something to keep in mind. If you wanted the whole PDF, you could download it, but the entire thing should really be right here. This is a scholarly article, so some of its features are, let me scroll all the way to the bottom, really great long bibliography. This person has looked at a tremendous amount of resources to build their argument, their statement, their analysis of this issue. And these can be really, really helpful to take a look at for yourself. In fact, if we had access to this book, he's commenting specifically, this is a very useful summary of early typologies of terrorism. And it's a changing thing, so it's kind of interesting. Terrorism and psychology, actually, going back to those search terms, maybe specifically that's what you might want to look at as terrorism and psychology, or domestic terrorism and psychology. Really fascinating. As we scroll back up, a couple other things I want to point out is you can get help with your citation. I have a feeling this is for communication, speech class, so you'll switch to APA. To get that model, you can cut and paste this into your document. Again, you can email this to yourself or download it, that sort of thing. Going back, I want to show you a couple other features. Always after that. So we wrote in, I'm going to type in terrorism and psychology, I'm just curious. Terrorism and extremism. Kind of the definition of terrorism, isn't it? Oops. Psychology. Just as an example. Okay. One thing that comes up, so this is a lot more because it's a much broader search, right? Terrorism and psychology. If we wanted to focus a little bit more narrowly, we could search them with results here. So say you really wanted to work on, freedom of speech. Oh, that's interesting. Or say you wanted to say, no, I'm interested in terrorism and psychology, but I still want to stick to my freedom fighters theme. You could search within those results, and it really narrows that down to those 62. And again, if that's in our academic journals, if you wanted to look at magazines or news, you would just click on one of those to switch it up. You can always undo it, saying, oh, that's too narrow. The other things you can do is you can look by date range, and you can also look specifically on this topic finder thing. Most people find this really fun. You can click on the wheel. But you can look at specifically at, we put at terrorism and psychology, but you can look at, I don't know, acts of terrorism, terrorist attacks, stress and terrorist attacks, coping. Again, we use psychology. If you wanted to look, you look at terrorism, but look at another adjective like, I don't know, terrorism and the law, you could just simply go back up here and change that, change your search results to your new topic or a different way you want to think about it. Let's just say we want to look at terrorism, wars, and politics. This is going to take you to the top 3 articles that match terrorism, psychology, and politics. And again, you just click on the blue to get to the article. So that's kind of the whirlwind tour. I hope that's helpful. And I hope it's on time. I know you might have your report due today. So But anyway, take care. Come see me if you need to.